This is a time-lapse demonstration of your master replication project in rendering. This is the picture that I chose to do for the demonstration, and I started with drawing the outline of this piece with just the landmarks in pencil. I want to make sure to take a good look at this picture and then transfer only the pieces that are going to be of use to me. What I mean by that is things that are in the shadows or in the deep, darkest areas is something that I can cover over with watercolor. I set up my workspace and all the brushes that I think I need and start with trying to match some color with the research image. Although you can't see it in this particular setup, I am looking at the research image at all times. I'm going to start with that first color match and giving a large wet swath of color where I'm being very careful to leave the white of the original image and just lay in the very basic idea of form and color of the lightest area of the piece. So I'm starting with the lightest color in the clothing all the way on the whole piece, whether that's the lightest color of the skin or the lightest color of the dress, and then mixing the next color down, bringing that into each space by adding in small amounts of yellow or brown or skin tone to each area. I'm focused on the primary form of all of the areas that I can see in the picture, as well as trying to mimic the brush strokes and the intensity of the color in each area. Again, you'll see a flash of that other piece of paper every once in a while as I'm looking at the original image, and I'm also using that extra piece of paper and a paper towel to control my color. I am still working on big overall areas of color and big deposits of color and shadow to really emphasize most of the areas in their primary shape, rather than focusing on each individual tiny detail. At this point, there's a good amount of shaping and there's a good amount of form being placed on that object with a little bit of detail. So as I move forward, I'm going to be focused on trying to add a little bit more detail into all of those places, so I use a much smaller brush. I'm looking to try and push the darkest values and start actually looking at my original image and mimicking color and placement of detail as exactly as I possibly can. Now, this will take a few passes. One of the reasons it'll take a few passes is that to get the color dark enough in the shadows and to reach a complex combination of colors, it's going to take more than just one application of color. So I'm going to lay in pinks and greens and blues, as well as laying in some red and undertones around the eyes and the face. I'm laying down different colors into the face. There's a little yellow, a little blue, a little gray, a lot of pink, and then I'm going to round out some more of the forms as I keep painting down the figure. Again, this is the first layer pass of detail, so as things start to dry, what I'm looking at in my picture is kind of the medium tones that are under the darkest tones, and really trying to get a good variation while leaving the lightest tone in place and then adding more to it as I go. In this setup, you can really see that I have my research image directly to the side, and I'm referencing that actively while I'm painting, in addition to the fact that I am have my mixing palette and my water on my right hand side because I'm right-handed, and I'm adding all sorts of details. So in the picture, I've started adding some of the line work and finer detail, like the outlining of the jacket, which is a green, and then I'm still working on some of the texture and color correction as I move forward. There's some dark spots, and I'm filling those in both on the arms and the white shirt and parts of the skirt. Even when I'm doing some of these detail pieces, I'm making them darker as they move into the curves of the jacket, and I'm emphasizing the folds of the neck piece and the handkerchief with outlines and shadow colors so that as these things move into the darker folds, they get a darker paint emphasizing that detail. Once again, I didn't highlight or trace every bit of the original image. I didn't pencil that in because there are lots of little pieces of it that if I'm using too much line work in the beginning, I'll either lose it while painting or not really be able to get rid of it with the paint. So a lot of those things in light areas like the hair, I'm just looking at the original image to mimic it, and I'm working on making sure that each little highlight and shadow in the hair, each highlight and shadow in the jacket is more pronounced. So around now, we're really getting into kind of a second pass of detail where, again, I'm doing a lot of shaping to make sure you can see the three-dimensional shape of the buttons, the three-dimensional shape of the arm, the three-dimensional shape of the hair, but I'm jumping back and forth between little pieces in the hat, defining the eyes now that the face is a little bit more dry, coming back to define the hands now that the wash for the gloves is a little bit more dry. And so you can see I'm choosing to move around in order to make sure that I have access to dry spaces in the picture. I also work on the background where when I get too dark, I go ahead and blot out the extra paint and let it dry before moving on to, again, more detail at the bottom of the dress. Some of the more iconic pieces that are easy to start with because they're very defined are often the pieces that you want to do at the end, because those details are really on top of where all of the variation of color and washes are for the extent of the project. Essentially, the way that it works is that most of the color is down first and then the detail goes on top, whether you're painting it for yourself or you're replicating somebody else's painting. So by making the intentional choice of doing all of those dark details last really helps to pop that picture out. There's some really dark background, and so I'm using black gouache to fill that in very purposefully and intentionally. And I actually do 2 layers of that gouache to make sure it's nice and dark. While that's drying, I go ahead and add just a little bit more black. And in a little bit, I'm gonna add some more gouache as well. So I'm just pushing and refining some of those shadows, making sure all of the patterns are in place. And then I mix a highlight color as opposed to that super dark color and bring a little bit more of that blue highlight that is in my original picture back into the piece. As well as doing like a sharp highlight on her eyes. So I just push a little bit more shadow, I just push a little bit more detail, and continue to play with the shape until it looks how I would want it to look. And that's it.